6:30. Good evening, everybody. Are we on? Are we live? Is this thing working? Yeah, it's on. It's just quiet. Good evening. Welcome to the Town of Waukesha Board meeting on September 27th, beginning at 6:30 p.m. I'd like to call the meeting to order and begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And Madam Clerk, could you call the roll?
Supervisor Wolf?
Here.
Supervisor Radke?
Here.
Chairman Merrick?
Present.
Supervisor Durr?
Here.
Supervisor Fisher?
Here.
And Madam Clerk, have we met the open meeting law requirements?
Yes, we have.
And we can begin then with citizens' comments. Good evening.
I'm Mary Graves, West 279, South 3382, Town Line Road, if you don't know it.
Welcome, stranger.
Oh, you do? Well, the only thing that I'm commenting about is administrator for the town of Waukesha. It sounds like our town is getting bigger and it needs more help in running it. But there are things that I have questions about. And one thing I was curious about, if it would be a full-time person, if it has anything to do with the voting, if she be involved with the voting part of it. And also I was wondering if the town advisor would meet and be advised by the town lawyer. I don't see that listed on the assisting in preparation or any of the other part of it, if the town lawyer would be involved in any of her or his advice, getting advice. Also, the only other question I have is that I would think it would be make sure that a person would be a citizen of the city of the county of Waukesha, and most preferably from the town of Waukesha. If you could have somebody that would have some knowledge of our town coming into it. And that's all.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Bob Stigler, West 235, South 6089, Big Bend Road. I also want to talk about the administrator, and I'm not against it. I'm not going to speak against it, but I got questions. You had the little list out, I guess, as to what the qualifications are going to be and what the duties are somewhat going to be. I'm just curious as to what the department heads are, and who's going to be regulated by this person. Is it the town clerk, the people in the town office, the building inspector, the planner? Are these all people that are going to be under the direction of the administrator, or what? I mean, there's never really been a clarification as to who's going to be under the direction of the town administrator. And I don't know if it's good, bad, or otherwise. Like I said before, I'm not for or against it, but I think maybe we ought to let the people decide this too, maybe put it on a referendum kind of thing after we get them informed as to what it's going to be and the salary and things like that. So I think it's kind of something that, it's a big decision here, you know, it's a big change in government, so I'd kind of like to see the people have some input into this on the ballot. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Going once, going twice. Then we can move on to meeting minutes of August 23rd, 2018. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion we approve the minutes of August 23rd, 2018.
And a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. On to
Note me as abstained. I was not.
I apologize. Abstentions.
No worries.
On to reports, starting with the clerk treasurer.
Right, in our general revenues, we have $2,353,000. Our general expenses are $1,757,000. Our fire inspection revenues are $73,930. Our inspection expenses at this point are $27,000. Our capital fund revenues are $751,000, and our capital expenditures at this point are $165,000. We had a public records request on all our vendor information from Smart Procure, which we did earlier this year. They just wanted the rest of the year. Well, we also had a non-for-profit group asked to use the town hall on Wednesday evening, the third Wednesday of the month, for a sponsored group of students. There's 6 students, 2 coaches, and the group is sponsored by Lego. It's a STEM-based program. And the price came in for the 2018-2019 salt prices. They came in at $77.88 a ton. The board earlier this year requested the allotment of 1,400 tons. The town is not obligated to take that full amount, but it is available for us. In your non-compliant, I gave you a new non-compliant because our inspector gave us some information today. That's on your desk. There are 23 properties that are in non-compliance. 7 of them are in court. 2 are here today. We have 5 that are in the first 30 days and 9 that we actually closed. I was appointed by the president of the Wisconsin Municipal Clerks Association as the chairperson of the Legislative Communication and Advocacy Committee. And the Village of Big Bend Plan Commission tonight is meeting to discuss the possible action regarding the property in the town located south of Glendale and Highway 164. Under Human Services, we brought on a new part-time employee. His name is Brian Trapp. As our summer help, Luke has left for school. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Any questions for the clerk?
Just a couple. I'm sorry. Could you, Kathy, give us the numbers again? The general budget, the revenue. I got a $2,353,000, but I missed the expense number, please.
Sure. I've got $1,757,000.
Okay, thank you. And one other just quick question. You mentioned the request for the use of facilities Wednesday night by this Lego group. 2 things. Is that just a one-time event?
No, it's going to go on for from October through June.
Okay,
And
and
they
did
will-
we act on that request or not, or what?
It's a nonprofit, so we've had nonprofits in here before, and as long as someone's here to open the door and close it behind them, we have not had a problem with nonprofits in the past.
And who's going to be
So-
responsible for that?
I will be responsible for that.
Okay, what time typically are they coming in?
They're coming in at 5:45, leaving at 7:15.
7:15. Okay, and they are doing that without any compensation at all to the town?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Then we can move on to DPW. Director Noli. Good evening.
Good evening. Our September work included some culvert culvert installs. We did a replacement on Quinn Road. We did a replacement on Tansdale Road. We put a culvert extension on Tim Drive. We did a new install on Merlin Lane. We also did a culvert end replacement on Tim Drive. We removed the asphalt and the concrete curbing that was requested on Moyer, so that cul-de-sac could be restored. We cleaned up trees from storms, responded to sheriff dispatch for fallen trees, vehicle and grounds maintenance, worked on some road patching. We monitored the progress on our paving, chip sealing work. Our chip sealing work is complete. Paving is 50% complete. That should be probably completed next week. Responded to job orders. Like the clerk said, we recently hired a new part-time employee, which an extra set of hands is really helping out a lot. October, we plan on doing some shoulder work tree and brush work now that we have some more help. Grounds maintenance, vehicle and equipment maintenance. Our road striping should be completed next week. We got some sign work to do, take care of job orders, keep up on culvert installs. Our snowplow employees are in place. We've got Paul, which is our full-time employee. I've got Andre, who's committed. I've got Mike Borchert, myself, and our part-time employees. So I think we're in pretty good shape for snowplowing. We'll try to get the equipment ready. You know, rain day, we'll start working on that and get geared up for winter. That's my report.
Thank you. Any questions for Director Noli? Thank you. Then we can move on to the Fire Department. Good evening, Chief.
August, we had 37 ambulance requests, 6 motor vehicle accidents, 5 fire responses. We gave mutual aid 9 times, and we received mutual aid 14 times, 10 of those being our paramedic program. We have 34 active members. 4 people are on leave of absence, 1 secretary-treasurer, 4 high school cadets. And I might have told you this last month, the high school cadets are all in the dual credentialing program between the high school and WCTC. So when they finish school in June, they'll be eligible to be certified firefighter 1s and licensed EMT basics. So they'll have that accomplished by the end of their senior year in high school. Fire Prevention Week starts October 8th through the 12th. Our kickoff is with open house and pancake breakfast on October 6th, 7 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. And the 2018 fire inspections are continuing.
Thank you. Any questions for the Chief? Thank you. And good evening, Deputy Moose.
Oof, reinforcements.
Hello.
I guess we better not ask too many questions.
You can step down if you want. I mean, we don't.
So for the month of August, we had 73 total calls for service, 56 house or building checks, 20 citations were issued, 3 ordinance citations issued. And of the calls for service, 4 911 hang-ups, 12 assist fire EMS calls, 6 suspicious person or vehicle calls, 8 animal cases, a disorderly conduct case, 2 threat complaints, 2 theft complaints, and 10 calls that would fall under other calls for service.
Any questions for the deputy? Thank you. Then we can move on to new business. A request by Diane McGonigal for extension for a non-compliant property is, and I hope that I get the name right, McGonigal, present tonight.
So,
good evening.
The property received a non-compliance on August 2nd. The property owner came in to see us as soon as they received the notice. The inspector has reviewed the property and stated that the siding has been fixed, but the roof still needs to be fixed. So they are here today. You can come on up.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir. My name is William J. McGonigal. I'm Diane's husband, and she's a little limp here with the cane and everything, so if you don't mind me speaking on our behalf.
Go ahead.
Perfect.
Okay. So we received the notice on, you want my address, I guess, too, right? Or S52, W23140, Hunter's Hollow, down in the town of Waukesha, or off of Partridge. We received the mailing notice of August 2nd on the 6th, and we received a certified copy August 10th. We came in to see Kathy that day that we got the certified notice, and we had attempted to, my wife sent Kathy an email to get on the agenda for August, but she had written the agenda, so she was gracious enough to move us to tonight. In the meantime, we fixed the siding on the side of the house, and the week of the 20th, or the 27th, and then the first week of August after Labor Day, we received 6 quotes, or it went out for 6 bids. One contractor came back and says, and mentioned to Kathy that we're so busy till the end of this year, and we're starting to book to next year, so that was kind of a no bid. He had done my neighbor's house, and I've got 5 other bids. Right now, we've applied last week for financing to try to refinance the house and incorporate the roof. The type of quotes that we've got are between $8,500 and $15,277. We've kind of picked a contractor for $9,350 because he would do roofs and gutters at the same time. So we're waiting for a response from the bank as of this morning. We haven't heard back. I checked with the manager at our bank, which is North Shore, and so that's where I'm at right now. So that's why I'm in front of you, sir, and asking for an extension.
Okay.
The contractors did indicate the one that we picked could do it middle of August. Some contractors that were at 15,277 could do it in 2 weeks. So they're running basically anywhere from a 10 to 30, 45 day, backlog, on the turnaround. So that's where we're at.
Questions?
So do you see this all being wrapped up in 60 days?
I certainly hope so, because I don't want to stand before you in another 30 days. And
December
27th.
27th. Oof, that's hard to believe. August.
yeah, it's hard to believe.
So is your request a 60-day extension?
Well, I talked to Kathy, and she said, "What would you like?" And we told her probably 60 to 90 days, because initially when we got the request, I think you said, "Well, that won't happen, so request 30 days," and that kind of keeps our feet to the fire.
You're
so to
here
speak.
to ask, so I'm asking what the request is, I guess.
Well, I'm trying to get the financing and see where we go from there, and that.
We're looking for a time frame.
Realistically, probably 45 to 60 days.
Okay. So I need you to ask for.
I'd ask for 60 days then.
Okay, good. There we go.
Sorry.
No problem.
No, I'm a little nervous.
I understand. No problem. We'll get you there. It's all good.
So that would put us into the first meeting into December. It's a little more than 60 days, but that would be the...
No, I'm thinking like November, like before Thanksgiving.
We do not have a meeting.
Oh, a meeting then.
Because it's Thanksgiving Day.
So that almost gives me 90 days then, basically.
That would just give you the
60
the
days from
second-
here.
Yeah, it'd be the second Thursday in December.
12/13. Any objection to that?
I'll move to grant an extension to Diane McGonigal until the 13th of December, and request that she and her husband appear at that meeting to report back to us at that time.
Second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Have a good evening.
You too.
Stop with that stir stuff. My dad's not here. Well, thank you for your service then. On to B, request for Sherry Knuth for an additional extension of non-compliant property at South 43 West 22351 Beheim Road, owned by Joyce House.
This property received non-compliance letter on June 18th because they had too many livestock, and the accessory building with the livestock in was too close to the property line. They had debris and refuse scattered throughout the property, and the grass was uncut and unkept. On July 26th, the board approved a 30-day extension. I received notice from Sherry that she, on August 20th, that she wanted to be on the August 23rd agenda. I instructed her that that was too late. Our agenda was already out, so she has come in front of you today. The property is in the RE Family Residential Estate District. Ag use is allowed in that district for over 20 acres. According to the GIS, the property is at 3 acres, 3.09 exactly. 13-3-5 states that keeping of riding horses, ponies, donkeys in private stables, domestic livestock and poultry in suitable enclosed buildings are permitted uses, provided that the minimum lot size is 3 acres, and this property does have that. In front of you, you have a copy of 13-3-5.
Any questions for the petitioner? Is there a motion? I'll make a motion for discussion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any questions for the petitioner?
So what are we in violation of at this point?
According to, now that it's been established, I do have 3 acres. I still apparently have too much livestock, and that the building is about 12 feet too close to the lot line. It's a 2-part building. My grandpa built it in 1972, like before the house was built, and then an extension was built next to it. I want to keep the livestock in the extension because they're attached. They're saying that the whole thing can't have it. So I'd like to. There's a way that we could work out that if there's no access to the one part of the building, that we could use the part that is. I'm sorry, this sounded confusing, but the part that is more than 50 feet away from the lot line, to keep what it sounds like. She was saying that only 1 goat.
So what livestock do you have now, ma'am?
I have goats.
Okay.
And
How many?
we have 15, but she said we can only have 2. We've already gotten rid of. We had 30 when this first became an issue, but that was including babies.
Okay.
Because they're dairy goats, so they get bred every year. So that was including babies, and we're down. And I do have negotiating a place that I can move additional livestock, so that we'd be in compliant. But goats they don't survive by themselves. They need to have a partner. And she's saying we can only have 1 goat. And so I guess that's what I'm asking is for 2 goats and some variance on the building.
So as I read the ordinance, keeping of riding horses, ponies, donkeys in private non-commercial stables, domestic livestock, and poultry in suitable enclosed buildings, provided that a minimum lot area is 3 acres or more, then 1 head of such livestock and or 20 fowl per acre may be kept. So the way I read this is it would only be 1 goat.
Yes, that's
Okay.
how she was reading it. That's what I heard today.
Okay.
Just clarified, I didn't quite follow. Did it say 1 per acre?
The way I read this, I'll read it again. Provided that a minimum lot area is 3 acres or more, then 1 head of such livestock may be kept, period. Additional livestock and fowl may be kept at the rate of 1 additional head per acre.
Got it. Thank you.
Now there's an and or in there for the 20 fowl, but I don't think we're talking about any fowl, so I just left that out. So as I read this, it would only be 1. That's what at least that's what the code calls for.
And then to go on, Supervisor Durr, it says that no building serving to house the permitted animals or poultry shall be closer to 50 feet to the lot line.
Right. I was trying to take these one step at a time.
Okay, fair enough. So, and I don't know that we have the authority to say, no, you can break the ordinance and have more than 1 head of livestock based on the ordinance. And correct me if I'm wrong, Madam Clerk, when we revise part of our code, is that still lie with the Board of Appeals with regarding building distances and setbacks?
If she wants a variance, yes, she would go to the Board of Appeals.
Board of Appeals. So we really don't have authority on either one of those items. You would have to make an application to appear before Board of Appeals for a variance. And we can't not enforce the code for one resident and then enforce it for another. So we don't have that latitude.
If I may, Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
I think what's a little different here is as opposed to the previous petitioner, they were asking for an extension to come into compliance, where in these cases, you're asking for an exemption essentially permanently. You're asking to go from 1 goat to 2 and to leave the building too close to the property line, but only house the livestock in one portion of the building.
Correct.
That's how I understand
Correct.
what you're asking.
Yes.
So I would concur with the chairman that we don't have the ability to waive the ordinance. What we do have the ability to do is grant extensions for people who are trying to come into compliance. I hope that helps.
It does help. So then can I ask for additional time to the animals? I am working since I talked to you this afternoon on a place that I can move them to rent. So if I can't keep them in my existing barn, then I just can't keep any. My other question is, when you're talking about animals, does that include the chickens have to be 50 feet away from the lot line? Or just livestock?
Animals.
I think
You're the chicken expert, Supervisor Fisher.
I'm going to deny that tonight, but that's one of my favorite topics. But just backing up a bit here, looking at the ordinance, so we're all on the same page. Under the RE single-family residential zoning, setback from the street for the principal building is 50 feet. Offset is 30 feet. My reading of this, the building that you want to use to house the animals in, that's a detached, separate building, is it? And that's not the residential structure, is that right?
No, it's not the house. It's a barn.
Okay, so it's a barn, and again, I don't think we have a drawing or whatever. Do you know, and I'm not asking to guess, what is the distance, and is it from the side property line or from the street, or
It's
what
from
are
the
we
side property line, and I'm not a surveyor, but my measurement is it's about 40 feet from the lot line instead of 50.
Okay, I guess the question and thank you asking, and I understand you're just kind of giving an estimate. Isn't this an accessory building then? Wouldn't any requirement for the side yard setback be for an accessory building? How are we getting to 50 feet? Maybe
Well,
somebody can help
if you
me.
look into F, it says, no building servicing to house the permitted animals or poultry shall be closer than 50 feet to the lot line of adjoining lot and district permitting residential use. So the original question you had was, does that include the chickens? And the answer to that would be yes. And the 50 feet, Supervisor Fisher, comes from section F and 13.3.5.
13.3.5.
F.
1F. It's on the first page.
1F, sorry.
1F, okay.
I missed a 1.
That's okay.
I see, okay. Got it. Okay, thank you.
Was there additional land at one time? Or has
No.
it always been the 3 acres?
It's always been 3 acres. They've just been there since 1972.
Okay.
So are you then asking for an extension to perhaps approach the Board of Appeals and an extension of time to rehouse the animals?
Yes.
Okay, and for how long of an extension, please?
60 days was the appeal process is where I'm concerned about how long it would take. The animals, I think I'm talking to somebody today, I might be able to do that in 30 days.
Okay. Is there a motion?
And are you looking to just go to 2 goats, or you want an exemption for more?
I'm only trying to get the 2, because I'm allowed to have 1, but they don't survive by themselves.
Okay.
So 1 doesn't do me any good.
I would suggest, Supervisor Radke, that the motion would probably be something along the lines of being able to approach a Board of Appeals with regards to the service building, not with regards to how many head of livestock, because I don't think we have the latitude to change that.
I was more thinking that that would lead to the fact that you gotta get down to 2 or less.
One.
Right. But somehow someone can agree to allow you to have 2, but if you wait till the 59th day and then say, well, I didn't get this.
No,
I've
I've been texting, and since I talked to her, I've been actively working on a property to move them to, like,
Okay.
as soon as this weekend, possibly.
Got it.
Is there a motion?
I'll move we extend, give an extension of 60 days.
And a second. I'll second that. Any further discussion?
Yeah, just one question. I know there are 2 issues here, but with regard to the proximity of the structure to the property line, I understand what the code says. We need to have somebody answer the question of whether that might be a legal non-conforming use or something. Do we know the answer to that before we could act on that?
If the accessory structure
Yes.
is a legal non-conforming?
If it is, yeah. Is that a possibility?
Don't know, I guess it could be a possibility. To
Well,
check with,
it's in an RE1,
so it's allowed.
so I don't know why it would be legal non-conforming. What's non-conforming about it for an RE1?
Well, if it's closer than 50 feet, if that has been used to used to house livestock prior to the creation of that ordinance requiring the 50 feet.
I understand.
I'm just saying maybe, I don't know, but I think somebody ought to answer that question. I mean, this isn't a new structure, right? You indicated
No,
it was built in the
70s.
70s. I'm just posing that
understand.
question, and I think that we'd be well advised to get an answer to that before we can act on it.
Well, additionally, if it's no longer used to house livestock, then it would revert back to the regular setbacks, which I believe are 25 feet on a side yard.
But as I understand what we're doing here, is going to house chickens either way. Right, you're going to keep the chickens, right?
I would like to.
Oh, my apologies, I didn't know that.
But I could find somewhere else to put them.
That's your choice. Because if you're not housing the livestock, then what the chairman says is correct. Then that could help solve your setback issues.
Because I only wanted to keep it in the. It's sort of like 2 barns, but they share a wall, and I'm being told that the whole thing can't be used.
My only point is
only one building is out.
My only point is at this point in time, I don't think we're in a position to make a determination as to whether that is or isn't non-compliant based on the information we've got tonight.
We still have to make a determination on an extension because right now she's got a notice, so we still have to act on it.
That's fine.
She is in non-compliance because she has 15 goats.
I understand that part of it, but the aspect of the non-compliance with the distance of the building off the property line, I would think during this, and I'll support 60-day extension, but I think part of what somebody ought to do, and I would think that that's something that we ought to be able to do, is to find out whether that indeed is non-compliant or if it might be legally non-compliant because of the past history of it. And I think we ought to get that answer. So within the 60 days, if we approve that, we know what the answer to that is.
Madam Clerk, will you look into that?
I will.
Thank you. Anything further? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please stay in touch with the clerk, and she'll check with town council and get that answer with regards to whether it might be legally non-conforming.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. On to C, request by Derek Klett for a hearing per section 8-1-5 sub F on notice to cut his prairie grass and flowers on property at South 38 West 22155 Arlo Drive.
Mr. Klett came, asked the board on August 23rd to allow him to keep his native wildflowers and grasses on his hill in his yard. He stated there are no noxious weeds and invasive weeds. The action by the board was to table. My understanding it was tabled because we were unsure if you were able to make a determination to keep the prairie grass. I've got in front of you section 8.815 sub F for you to take a look at.
Evening, Mr. Klett, and I presume Mrs. Klett.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we make a determination that his prairie grass in the front yard is not a nuisance.
And a second.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
I'll get you a written statement on that within 7 days. Okay. Thank you.
On to D, discussion and possible action on the administrator position. You have in front of you, we've talked about this previously a few times. Job description, objectives, qualifications, duties, with regards to a potential new position within Town Hall. A couple questions were asked by the audience. Would this be a full-time position? Yes, indeed, it would be a full-time position. Who would report to the administrator? It would be obviously all of the office staff, the DPW, all inspectors, fire chief, and at this point that's pretty much all that we have with regards to town staff. I think probably town attorney, planner, and engineer also would be under the guidance of the administrator. Questions?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion for discussion of the town administrator position.
And a second.
I'll second.
Discussion.
I think there were some good questions brought up by the people that spoke. You answered some of them. I think we do need to document in the job description exactly who would report. Full time, you answered that. I do not believe that the administrator is involved in the voting process. That is a specific duty that's delegated to the town clerk. I didn't quite understand the attorney question, but I don't believe that we would be seeking somebody with a law degree, so that certainly it wouldn't change any of the duties of the attorney. I think specifically listing who reports to them is an excellent idea. And in regard to a referendum, state statute specifically calls that the town board is to create the position, not that they have to create the position. I'll read it verbatim. The town board may create a position of town administrator and establish qualifications, compensation, and terms of employment for the position. The town administrator may be employed to serve at the pleasure of the town board for a fixed term. If employed for a fixed term, the town may suspend or remove the town administrator for cause. So I see it as being a specific town board responsibility to make a decision on this position, much as we have for other positions in the town. So there was a question about a referendum and things like that, so that's how I see that.
Thank you, Supervisor Durr.
I don't necessarily see this as an added position. I think that it's quite possible that we have people within our staff right now that could be elevated to that position and combine some of the duties. That's my take on it.
Okay.
I've got a couple of questions, I guess. First one is whose vision is this that we should have a town administrator?
I think it probably originated with me, so that we
Okay.
had better function, better cohesiveness within the office and all town departments, because right now nobody reports to anybody in particular.
Okay, I guess a couple of follow-up questions. We had, a couple of months ago, we had that organizational chart, and I don't know what happened to that, and I had some questions about that because the organizational chart, as I recall, it had town administrator, and then the people to report to it included, I think, the fire department or the fire chief. I have a real concern about that, particularly when it gets to the duties, because my understanding is the fire department and fire chief does not report or would not report to a town administrator, that many of those are autonomous functions and responsibilities. We can get into that in a bit more detail. I know it had the town administrator, basically the sheriff reporting to the town administrator. That leaves me scratching my head just a little bit, and it was touched on, but what kind of concerned me in that organizational chart, there was nothing in there for the town attorney, the town planner, the town engineer, the town building inspector, the town auditor, the town assessor, whatever. So I think any discussion on this, I think we got to get back to that organizational chart. Why did that disappear? Anybody have an answer to that? I mean, that's what was presented a couple months ago.
It was just a draft. I put a draft in just as I put this draft in.
I understand that, but the organizational chart is gone.
Yeah, it wasn't in the draft this week.
Okay. But I mean, I think any serious discussion of this, we need to get back to that, because I think that raises a lot of questions. The other thing that in the organizational chart, there's a town administrator and then deputy clerk treasurer. There was no clerk treasurer. So what happens to the position of clerk treasurer?
I would suggest it depends on the size of the town and how complex the town becomes with regards to the duties of the administrator and or clerk treasurer. Perhaps it could be, you could have an administrator, clerk, treasurer.
Is that what you're proposing?
We're talking about it.
Okay. Well, my whole thing, and I think maybe we get back to that organizational chart, that appeared as though those positions were eliminated, and I think they're probably required by state statute, aren't they?
They are required
so
by law.
They can't be eliminated. So maybe when we revisit this, I think we got to have a organizational chart, and I think we got to have that some of that stuff laid out and thought out.
I don't know if I do.
You want to take 2 minutes and see if you can
I can try to find one.
Okay.
I would think we could easily draw one up.
My lines aren't very straight, but I got to start.
There you go.
Maybe, or you want to wait till she comes back? We can do that.
Go ahead.
I guess question that I have, maybe Chairman Merrick, you can maybe answer to it. I know, and this goes back to the Freeman on Friday, July 27th. They had quoted you in there as saying that the administrator would serve as a point person so that members of each department would have someone to report to. And I'm wondering if you could elaborate on that. I mean, at this point in time, we only have 2 departments, I guess. We got a fire department and a public works department. Did you have something else in mind?
Well, you've obviously got the office. You've got the attorney, the planner, the assessor, the fire department, engineer.
Okay, so, and I guess maybe that goes back to the other question. So your vision is it's not just the 2 departments, if you will, fire department, which again I don't believe should be under the direction or authority of the town administrator, but that and the DPW, those others are basically outsourced or out-contracted services. They're not town departments, but your vision is all of them would report to the town administrator. Is that your vision?
Well, I don't know that I have a vision, but yes, that would be my,
Okay.
that would be the idea behind this, yes.
Okay.
What's yours?
I don't have one at this point in time. This isn't my vision. I'm trying to find out what people have in mind.
Well, it's open for discussion, so what would you think?
Well, I guess I'll ask another question before I answer to that. And that's, maybe goes part and parcel to it. I see 29 proposed duties in the description of this. They're very specific. Where or from whom did that list of 29 proposed duties come? What's the source of origin of that?
I can't speak to that intelligently.
Does anybody know?
I believe it was a combination of our neighboring municipalities that have administrator positions and discussions with other towns as to what they feel an administrator position would entail.
Okay, so did you help put it together?
I did help review some of this, absolutely,
With whom?
with Clerk Nicholas.
Okay, thank you. So what municipalities did that come from?
I don't remember offhand, but I do know that there were a couple of them that recently went to an administrator position. Part of the reason is because there is a lack of cohesion between the divisions. So additional municipalities looked at it and said we need more of a point person for the day-to-day functions so that it's not just kind of random or that there's a power struggle as to when something needs to be done or discussed or planned. For example, with a DPW department, if there are particular duties that get called in for a list of requests that need to be done, who necessarily prioritizes that and or takes the calls? DPW department doesn't take those calls. If additional citizens or members of the board request things to be done, who's the one that needs to plan as to which needs to happen first?
So you think that should be the town administrator instead of a director of public works? Is that your vision?
I have my vision of it would be that one person helps corral and organize all the different departments.
Okay, but with the DPW part of it, you think the town administrator ought to decide priorities on that instead of a director of public works? Is that your vision?
I think the two should work together, and yes, that there needs to be somebody that's in charge.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on that, Brian? Yeah, we can do it.
I think a DPW director should be able to prioritize work assignments. They have the most direct hands on resources and so forth, so I think that ought to be responsibility of Director of Public Works to organize, direct, and prioritize public works work. That's my vision.
So keeping on that same vein, suppose we need to hire another individual in the DPW department, which we recently did. It was determined by the, several people that we needed an additional set of hands. So who takes that responsibility then and puts the ads out and does the legwork and gets everything in place to interview and ultimately hire an individual? Is that the DPW director?
Could be clerk involved in it, could be committee or committee of the town board. I think there's all kinds of different options for that.
My vision would be that you would have an administrator that would facilitate all of that.
Okay. Did you find an org chart or not? Or no? Couldn't find it. Okay. Well, I guess looking at a couple of the other duties there, I see, and I'm paraphrasing a bit, we can look at it, but the town administrator is supposed to be responsible for safety, and again, that org chart we had was the town administrator overseeing basically, or the way I read it, the fire department, the DPW. Is that realistic to think that the town administrator is responsible for safety for the fire department and the DPW? That kind of raises questions for me.
Which line item, please?
23.
I'm looking at 23 and 24. 23 says direct town personnel as required to maintain safe public operations inclusive of periodic safety training. And 24 says ensure all safety work standards are complied with. And I guess my specific request or question on that would be, with regard to the fire department, aren't those really responsibilities of the fire chief and not a potential town administrator?
I think those are two mutually exclusive items. Direct town personnel as required to maintain safe public operations. That would be a DPW and making sure that they're following OSHA regulations and so forth, inclusive of periodic safety training. There probably should be some periodic safety training with regards to using a wood chipper, an excavator, any type of that equipment. Ensure all safe work standards are complied with. Again, I think that's an OSHA standard type of thing, and I don't think that has anything to do with expecting a town administrator to train the fire staff. I think that's kind of a ridiculous assertion.
Well, I think it's kind of ridiculous too, but that's why if you find that org chart, I guess let's ask it this way, is the fire department or the fire chief, I thought, was largely responsible to the fire commission. Hiring and firing and so forth for the fire department is done by the fire commission.
That's not true.
The org chart says the town administrator is going to be doing that.
No, it does not.
Just a
It
minute.
does to me.
Let's clarify something. The fire chief is hired by the fire commission, but cannot be fired by the fire commission, because the fire commission is the body that sits on an appeal and becomes the judiciary committee if he is terminated by the town board for his appeal. So the fire commission does not hire and fire the chief. They hire them, but they cannot fire him because they are his place of appeal.
What about fire department personnel?
The fire commission approves all fire department personnel.
Right. So my concern is, again, if you go to the org chart, it shows the fire department reporting to the town administrator.
Okay.
The way the org chart is set
I
up.
disagree. I believe it's the fire chief reporting to town administrator.
Okay, fine.
Okay.
You'd agree the fire chief is the head of the fire department.
I would agree.
Okay. Then when I go and read 18 that says conduct hiring, promotions, and terminations with town board approval, well, leave it at that one. I don't think that applies to the fire department, and I don't think that would be appropriate responsibility for a town administrator.
Okay.
Okay, so, well, hold on. Hold that note,
Number 18 he's referring to.
but don't cross it out yet.
Oh, I'm not saying cross out. I'm opening this up for discussion tonight. I mean, I guess I look at the same thing in terms of establishing goals and performance levels for employees and provide feedback on process.
Hold on. Let's stay on the first one,
All right.
number 18. Under duties, be responsible for the administration of all day-to-day operations of the town government, including an awareness of enforcement of all town ordinances and state statutes. So if the state statutes dictate that the town administrator is not allowed to hire or fire a certain individual within town government, obviously the administrator, we're not going to change state statutes or town ordinances to make that happen.
And I'm not here to argue with you tonight, but all I'm saying is,
I'm
let
not
me
arguing,
finish.
I'm just
finish.
pointing out a fact.
Yeah, but let me point out a fact or a few other things. When it says to be conducting, when we've got an organizational chart, and it's regrettable that's been lost, okay?
We'll make a new one.
Everybody's got a copy. Well, maybe that's the place then that we should start over with that, because I don't think that organizational chart should show the fire chief or the fire department answerable to the town administrator. I'll just leave it at that.
Good. Let's leave it at that.
And I think for many good reasons.
Now, you had another point?
Position. Let's go.
That's enough for now.
Oh, well, there you
Then
go.
you're done with your discussion on this issue? Okay. Any other discussion?
Well, I guess I'll toss one last thing out, and
I
that's,
thought you were done. Okay, go ahead.
well, all right. May I have one more minute?
Sure.
We got time tonight, don't you? The Brewers aren't even playing.
You want 1 o'clock? Or?
Sure, I'll be done before 7:30.
I thought you said a minute. Oh, okay,
Use that
fair.
clock back there. You can time me, okay?
Ready?
Go.
Go.
All right. Back to you, I guess. The idea of a
referendum does not mean it needs to be a binding thing. So back to your comment, when you're basically saying this isn't the public's to make any decision on, I think we ought to give serious consideration if we're thinking about doing this to an advisory referendum where there's abundance of information out there. I don't think anything about the statute precludes an advisory referendum to the town board. Did I get done by 7:30?
Did.
Thank you very much.
So let me ask you a question. So do you think that the creation of a town administrator is more or less of a big decision, for the lack of a better term for the moment, than changing the town board from 3 to 5 supervisors? Because I don't remember a referendum when the town board went from 3 to 5 supervisors and you were then appointed a supervisor.
I was not appointed a supervisor. I was elected.
When you were elected.
Thank you. And your question is what?
Which one is of greater impact? Which one is of greater... because you didn't take any particular exception to changing the town board from 3 supervisors to 5 supervisors, but to add continuity into town government, you take great exception.
Chairman Barrett, I was not involved when the town went from 3 to 5 supervisors, okay?
You didn't voice any particular concern or exception.
I was not on the town board.
Were you part of the town? Were you a town resident?
I didn't come to the town meeting to voice an opinion on that. But I think they're both important. If you're going to ask me, I think probably it wouldn't have been a bad idea to have an advisory referendum on that. So there's your answer.
Interesting.
Well, very good.
Any other conversation regarding this issue?
Well, I think the point to remember here is we're not necessarily looking at adding a full-time administrator position. We're looking at combining some of the duties with existing staff. Does anybody else have a different vision that we're looking at adding a particular position just as an administrator?
Well, I guess until you produce the org chart that eliminated the clerk treasurer, if you're going to eliminate the clerk treasurer, that might be true. If you're not, then we're adding a position. So I think it circles back to that.
Here we go. We'll do an org chart. At the top of the org chart is what? Chairman? Town board?
I would say town board, then chairman, then administrator.
Okay. There we go. We're halfway done with it.
A third. Are you drawing this?
I got it. I got 3 boxes.
All right. Underneath
board, chairman, administrator, right?
Underneath admin, box for DPW.
Okay.
And that'll be DPW director. Underneath DPW director would be DPW employees.
Okay.
Underneath that would be sheriff.
Under DPW? Or
I'm sorry.
We're talking a separate
we're back
box,
to
right?
new box. Sheriff.
Sheriff?
New box again. Attorney.
Okay.
Under attorney, municipal court attorney.
Okay.
New box. Planner.
Okay.
New box. Assessor.
Okay.
New box. Engineer.
Got it.
New box. Fire chief. Underneath fire chief, assistant chiefs. Underneath assistant chiefs, officers. Underneath the officers, firefighters and EMTs.
Okay.
I think there can be a box in there for clerk, and underneath clerk, office staff. And the admin position does not have to be mutually exclusive of also being clerk and treasurer. So you could put a little note to that.
Kathy, does the law allow the administrator to be a clerk as well?
Yes, and a treasurer.
Okay. Okay, so you got that, Brian?
Draw it up and present it.
You won't read my writing, but it's right here. You heard what it all is.
Oh, put something together so this can be considered the next meeting so the public can take a look at it. Put something together.
Well,
I mean, we're making sausage here at the wrong time, respectively. Put something together. It's got some thought behind it.
No,
and put it in paper so people can look at it.
What we're doing is discussing it. That's what the motion was. So we're discussing the administrator position. One of this that you want to continue on is an actual org chart, which we'll do. And I've got right here, but I'll have it done a little bit better for you. But you heard what it was, right?
It's not.
What you want out of that is to eliminate specific divisions, right? You don't want the
No.
fire chief on there.
Don't
Is that
get
what
ahead
I'm
of
saying?
yourself.
Well, because
Respectfully.
I will do two different org
No.
charts if you like.
No, you're not doing an org chart for me, okay? There are
Actually,
99.
we are.
I don't believe anybody else has asked for one, so
How
I
many
will-
people are there in the town of Waukesha?
I-
Over 9,000 people? I would think they would have some interest in it.
I haven't
My
heard one of them
concern
ask
is,
me for an org chart other than yourself, so.
well, all right, call me
So I will
call
do
me
that.
out of sorts. We had an org chart until 2 months ago that disappeared.
Okay,
And
well,
I
then
asked, let me finish.
There's a working draft
May I
that's
finish?
gone. So now we've got another one, and I'll have it for you by our next meeting.
May I finish? I even asked Clerk Nicholas to put it a number of weeks ago onto the website, right, with the description. True? Yes, and I told you if you didn't know how to put that into there, because that was part of the original proposal, I'd help you and have one of my office people show you how to do it. So we need at least to get back to where we started. So
I
put it on so we can look at it.
org chart.
Let her answer the question.
Yeah,
You
she
asked her-
may.
You've asked me to put things on the website, and I put on what I thought you've requested. I did not know you were asking for an org chart. What you said, what I understood it was that you thought that I changed the state statute part of the administrator, that the link wasn't working. Because what I got from my staff was that the link wasn't working. So I changed and put the whole statute on there, so you didn't have to go to a link, and that's what I did.
Yeah, we needn't belabor that anymore, but the day before the election, I know you were incredibly busy, left a phone message, you even called me back and said what was presented to us back in July included that preliminary org chart, and I thought that that should be part of what was posted on the website. So let's move on from there.
And I apologize,
think,
I didn't get that out of our conversation.
yeah, well, that's fine. So we need to move on, but I think we need to have something that everybody can take a look at, and I think that ought to be, if we're going to consider that in the future, I think that ought to be posted on the website and stuff so people can look at it in the town of Waukesha. It's not for my benefit. I'm going to ask questions about it, but I think it should be there so we can all have something to take a look at. That's simple.
The administrative position stuff was on the website, just not the org chart.
Kathy, do you recall which local municipalities recently went to an administrator position?
Town of Lisbon just recently went in. Town of McGuanago has a administrator, clerk, treasurer. Town of Brookfield has an administrator. Town of Oconomowoc has an administrator. Town of Genesee has an administrator. Those are the ones I know off the top of my head.
Okay.
Thank you.
So other than an org chart, and I guess I'm assuming that everybody's looked at this since it's been in our packets for a while, but are there any additions or concerns or discussion on any of these points that we need to do as long as we're on the stage?
Well, I think what you ought to do, if this is a vision or something you want to suggest, I think you or somebody actually ought to go to the Town of Waukesha Code of Ordinances, and I think if you go to Title 2, I think it's Chapter 4, it goes through in great detail, cross-references to state statutes. It says what the town clerk does, the town treasurer does. I think somebody ought to come up with a draft of how that entire ordinance would be changed if we were to consider the position of a town administrator in addition to the clerk, treasurer, whatever. I mean, that's all spelled out in there. In order to do this, the town ordinance would have to be changed. So I think that needs to be put on the list.
So let me ask you a question. Knowing full well that we were going to have this discussion this evening, and knowing full well that you obviously did extensive research into this to know the title and the chapter of the town ordinances that allow for a clerk treasurer and the duties of such in the town of Waukesha, why wouldn't you have brought that to somebody's attention prior to this so that they could have drafted something in a preliminary draft form instead of bringing it here and once again blindsiding us?
Chairman Merrick, this is not blindsiding.
Of course
No,
it is.
Listen, I have not done extensive research on this. Am I familiar with the Town of Waukesha Code of Ordinances? Yes, I'll admit to being familiar with it, as to a certain extent should every person who's sitting behind the table here. I mean, you get a couple laptops up here, you could draw that up in 20 seconds and see it. This isn't any blindsiding or anything. This is an important, big decision. I'm willing to have the discussion on it, but whoever's attempting to put this forth and promote it, you need to have a clear, well, then you need to have a clear vision. You need to have an org chart. You need to go through and look at the town ordinances and stuff and say what this would look like. Is it a new position? Is it a town administrator, clerk, treasurer? Does the clerk treasurer still exist? Well, all I'm saying is I don't think the homework has been done on this yet, and that can continue for another discussion.
That's
I mean,
why
this
we're
was put,
having discussion.
This was put on tonight's agenda about discussion and possible action. I mean, look at what it says right on the website that we were going to discuss the possibility of this. We're not any step beyond that. So need to do the things that need to
instead
be
of
done.
hindering it, why wouldn't you help it by bringing these things to light previous to a point where we can't do anything about it? If you wanted to look at the ordinance that suggests what the duties for the town clerk and the town treasurer are, why wouldn't you have brought that to light a week ago?
No, Chairman Merrick, it's real simple. This
because
is
you don't want to bring it forward because you want to be confiscatory.
I'm not sure what that means in this instance. Confiscatory, it means want to confiscate something. Fancy word, it means no place here. This is real simple, okay? This is the public's business, okay? And it needs to be done in public. This is for discussion purposes. To say that I should be, go ahead and giggle all you want, that's
I'm not
fine.
giggling, I'm laughing.
Oh, well, go ahead and laugh then, that's fine. Get up and do jumping jacks. I don't care. This is the place to have the discussion in public. It's an important issue. It's important. The public is entitled to know what's going on, to be informed, to comment about it, and to have the discussion here. So there's nothing about blindsiding. That's what these meetings are supposed to be about. So
I agree.
Bring the information
Share it
and
in
let's
public.
talk about it.
I absolutely agree, 100%. So if you have something to share that we would need to garner additional information for, share it with the clerk so that she can bring those things up and perhaps get you a draft of something before you blindside us at the 9th hour.
John, this isn't the 9th hour. This is the 1st hour, okay? This is the beginning of the discussion on this. Other than you try to trot it out in a closed meeting, which is a violation of the state of Wisconsin open meetings law.
Nonsense,
No,
Brian.
let me finish.
You're not again going to accuse me or this board of breaking the law.
Did.
Well, you're full of garbage again. Because you were lying about it last time and you're lying about it again.
I just did, and this is the place to have the discussion in public. I just did.
That this board is breaking the law. You're full of baloney.
It has to be discussed in public, and
Okay.
you know that. The last time you said this was old business because it had already been discussed in a closed
You're not going to accuse me of breaking
meeting.
the law, Fisher.
You just said that, Chairman Merrick. Thank you.
Okay, Supervisor, Supervisors and Chairman. This was the period that this was brought up, so I can clear it up for our residents. When we were talking about my contract, I asked for the position. I asked for the title. So we know that's where it came from, and no other discussion was had. We said that we needed to write it up and that we needed to bring it to the table. There was no other discussion other than the fact that I asked for it when my contract was renewing. That's all it was. So now we've brought this document forward. It's been on the website for a month, and what this was a good draft to see what you as the town board wanted to either remove or add to objectives, qualifications, duties, and such, because a ordinance or a change in our handbook cannot be made until a position is actually, if you guys decide to put in a new position. I'm only giving you something to work off of. This is your time to work off of this piece of paper. So if there's something you want scratched off or you want something added or reworded, this was the time to do it. So that's why it's brought.
Yeah, and respectfully, and I appreciate, Kathy, your candor about that. My point is the proper place to begin the discussion of the position of town administrator was not with you, which, and I agree with your description, was not with you requesting the creation of that position and the title and the raise in a closed meeting. And that's why I objected to it at that point in time and said this needs to be put forth in public. It needs to be publicly discussed. We need to create the position, and frankly, if we are destined to do that after we have a complete and thorough job description and have some discussion on what impact that might have on the existing clerk treasurer position, we get through all of that.
Okay,
I think this is probably a position that probably needs to be publicly advertised. That's my point of view. And that's why I think it needs to be a public discussion. Totally, and that's why we're having it. It's not blindsiding anybody.
That's exactly why we're having the discussion. And there was nobody that made any implication, nobody implied that this was going to be approved in closed session. Yes, Supervisor Dart.
If I can ask a question, so when we had the closed session and the clerk brought it up as part of her contract negotiations, is your recollection of the issue at that time when you said that it needed to be publicly discussed, that your fellow board members agreed with you and that that was the end of the conversation, and the next conversation we had about it was last month and then it was tabled to today?
It came back to July. I think that is
so
largely true.
So then what do you feel about that was in violation of the law?
Because we were talking about creating a position in closed session. It was not a contract negotiation. It was creation of a position in closed session. That's not true. It certainly was.
So if once it was part of the clerk's request as part of her contract that she wanted to examine the administrator position, and at that point the discussion ended and the next discussion we had, you consider that a violation of the law?
I think we were headed.
Yes or no?
Yes, headed that direction. I absolutely agree with it. If I hadn't interceded, I absolutely think it was not noticed that way about creating a new position. I mean, I even had media
just
people
for the record,
me.
If
you cannot create a position such as that in closed session, you can't. That's a violation of the
and we
I
were not.
I assure you that you would have not been the only one to raise that objection, because immediately I agreed with you and said, if we're going to do this, it has to be a position, and I don't disagree with you that it needs to be publicly advertised. So don't portray that others didn't agree with you, because my recollection of the meeting is that as soon as you brought it up, all of your fellow board members agreed with you, and the next time we talked about it, and every time since, it has been in public.
I appreciate your seeing my point of view. Again, the stumbling block on that, Chairman Merrick put it on. I mean, this is what's ironic about it. In July, it was on as old business. You were quoted in the Freeman saying it was old business because we discussed it already in a closed meeting. Tonight, it's back to new business. Maybe it should be old business tonight because it was brought up in July. It's just that simple. And I appreciate if you, in fact, agreed with me at that point in time, your support, because what we were attempting to do was wrong. Thank you.
You're a liar. I'm going to move on.
Town board members, is there anything on this document you would like to see changed? I understand we need to do an org chart. Is there anything on this document you would like changed when it's brought back to you?
I guess I'm going to answer it that way. Lay the groundwork with the organizational chart, proposed change to the ordinance. I mean, whether this is administrator, clerk, treasurer, they're two separate positions. I may have a lot more questions and stuff when some thought is given to this and it's presented. So I'm not going to sit here tonight and say I have no other questions. I think it's a good place to start the discussion. I might ultimately support this, but we got to think this through and put some information out that people can look at and respond to. It's that simple.
So you want me to scrap this and start over? So then the board can start this over? I just don't know what you want to keep, sir.
I think I've been pretty clear about saying,
Bring this back with an organizational chart.
I think we need an organizational chart. I think somebody needs to look at the ordinance. Maybe you need to even talk to Attorney Macy or somebody. And if we're going to create this, let's back up for a minute. Would you agree that if we're going to do this, we have to do major revisions to the Town of Waukesha Code ordinances? That's a question. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
Then why don't you put together a draft or something of what that would look like, or somebody's vision of what that would look like?
But until you agree on what the objectives and qualifications of the position, I can't write an ordinance change. And when we write the ordinance change, it would, if you were to approve down the road, if you were to approve an administrative position, it would be with the consideration that it would not take place until these things are done, until it's in our new Code of Ordinances has been approved and such. But you have to first start at a building block, and this is the first part, so then I can move forward.
That's fine. It's a good place to start, but again, the organizational chart, if the vision is there no longer is a clerk treasurer, and this is one position, then the job description is going to be wholly different than if there's an administrator and a separate individual who's the clerk treasurer. Can we all agree on that? Those are two completely different things.
Well, you've all heard my opinion on it, so let's hear yours. Do you want to have two separate positions, or are we looking at one combined position?
I have not made up my mind on that at this point in time. I'm looking for more information.
Okay, on that same building block theme that we're on, how can we get any further if we don't know where we're going to go? You want us to do two of them? You want, obviously, a couple of different organizational charts. I've already gotten that. So do we want to combine the position
Maybe,
or not?
maybe it would be
My opinion is to combine the positions. Let's go down the line. Larry, you want to combine them or keep them as?
Combine them because we're not big enough to have two separate positions.
Fair enough.
At this point.
Chairman?
Combined. I would
Supervisor?
anticipate that it would be combined.
I don't think we need to have two full-time
Got it.
people at big sum of money, but then we need to come forth and say, is this, I mean, maybe
So
we
we're
don't.
saying one position, right?
Let me just finish. The organizational chart we had, and you really, if people can't find that, I'll send you a copy of it.
I got it,
okay?
Brian. I got your message
all
loud
right,
and
but-
clear.
all right,
to put
that's
a
got a
frickin' organizational
all right.
chart together, and it's right here. And
Jim,
tomorrow morning, if
Jim,
you want it,
real
I'll
quick.
email it to you. Okay?
Real quick, okay?
Got it.
The organizational
Message
chart
heard,
has
Brian.
got, no, there's one more. It's got a town
Okay.
administrator, okay? And it's got a deputy clerk treasurer, okay?
And
Maybe.
do you want both of those, or do you want one?
No,
one
I'm
box
saying-
or two? Everybody said
Let me
one were to you.
okay.
One or two?
You want to listen for a minute?
Not really, because I'm tired of listening. It's
Very
just
good.
going around in a circle.
All right.
So we'll do one box.
Now,
Yep.
here, you made your own conclusion. The question for me is, do we need an administrator and a clerk treasurer?
Exactly.
No, listen. Option one, an administrator and a clerk treasurer, okay?
Yep.
I'm thinking no, okay?
Got it.
Do we need, unless we don't have a deputy clerk treasurer, then that's a possibility. I don't think we need to add another piece of personnel, but you got to decide whether it is administrator, clerk treasurer with a deputy clerk treasurer, somebody underneath it, or whether it's an administrator and a clerk treasurer, and then we don't need a deputy clerk treasurer, drop somebody else out underneath it. So make two org charts.
Got it.
Thank you.
So we got to start.
Anything further on this?
Is there anything anybody wants to add to this or take off? Has anybody looked at it beyond Supervisor Fisher? As long as we're in our happy mode here. Okay.
Well, if I'm putting together the administrative clerk treasurer, then this will, it'll be a change document, because then all the clerk treasurer position stuff will be in it as well. So is that what you're looking for? So the administrator clerk treasurer position, that'll be the top of your org chart. This document will now say, instead of administrator, it'll say administrator clerk treasurer. All the clerk treasurer stuff, all the administrative stuff will be in the document. So this document next week will not, or next time will not look anything like this.
I don't
Can you-
know,
can
I
you-
don't know if
Can
that's,
you include this one for reference material so that it doesn't get lost?
Sure, I can do that.
Thank you.
I don't know that that's the direction that I would go, because perhaps at some point in the future, if the town grew to 12 or 13 or 15,000 residents, maybe you have an administrator and a clerk treasurer. Perhaps the document says something more along the lines of the administrator and clerk treasurer can be the same position.
I would think if we get that big, then we just
Redo it again?
do it.
Okay, fair enough.
Be a lot easier, instead of the what ifs. What if we got smaller?
Good
What
point.
if?
Fair enough. If there's nothing further, we can move on to 9, accounts payable.
That was fun.
In the amount of $7,801.81. Is there a motion
Move, we pay that amount.
and a second?
I'll second.
And Madam Clerk, a roll call vote?
Chairman Merrick,
Aye.
Supervisor Durr,
Aye.
Supervisor Radke,
Aye.
Supervisor Wolf,
Aye.
and Supervisor Fisher.
Abstain.
And secondly, the amount of $25,248.58. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion, we pay that amount.
Second.
And Madam Clerk, a roll call vote, please?
Chairman Merrick,
Aye.
Supervisor Fisher,
Aye.
Supervisor Durr,
Aye.
Supervisor Radke,
Aye.
Supervisor Wolf.
Aye.
Motion carries. And lastly, a motion for adjournment.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
And a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are